A few weeks ago, I was invited to Derek Gallimore's show, the Outsource Accelerator Podcast. Derek is a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Outsource Accelerator, which he often describes as the Alibaba of outsourcing, providing the gateway for businesses to connect with outsourcing suppliers. In early 2022, I sat with Derek to study how the pandemic changed the outsourcing landscape and how the supply and demand for software developers were evolving. And you can find that episode in the show notes if you missed it. Of course, a lot has changed since then, and we're discussing how in today's episode. We're also looking at the latest tech scene updates, outsourcing market trends for 2023, and what sets offshoring in the Philippines apart from other countries. I hope you enjoy listening as much as we have enjoyed recording it.
Fred, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you, Derek?
Fantastic. Fred, I want to get updates. We spoke about 30 weeks ago, nearly a year ago, about the tech scene, and it is something that changes so fast, not least the technology, but also the people within it. And now also, we had a massive sort of hiring crunch, labor shortage a year ago as we came out of the pandemic, and now we seem to be coming into a bit of a recession, and certainly Silicon Valley is letting off a lot of the staff. So be great to get your insights on that. I suppose we can start by saying how is the tech scene as you see it in the Philippines?
Yeah, so I think in the Philippines, it's still very dynamic. So a lot of people are still hiring people in the Philippines from abroad. So we've seen these high-profile companies like fire a lot of people. We have this example of Twitter and maybe Facebook, and even Google, I think, is apparently about to fire a bunch of people. But those are all companies that grew so fast and maybe a bit too fast, and now they just realize that they have to get rid of a certain amount of people. And so there's a part of the firings that are technical people, but it's not all of it. And what I've read and what I can see is that smaller companies who haven't been growing so fast maybe don't need to also let go of that many people. So we see that makes the big headlines because it's big companies, but apparently the situation is not as bad as we might want to think. And I just spoke with a bunch of people in the Valley saying that, yes, there are these firings, but the economy is still great there. So,
Right.
Yeah.
It's a mixed picture, isn't it? Because you hear that, obviously there's sort of down valuations and things like that. VCs don't have as much money, but certainly they have a lot in reserve still, and it might be the next round that is lacking more money. Generally, startups now have been told to try and make profitability instead of just burn. So there is a change in behavior. But it seems, from what I understand, like the big Silicon Valley firms like the Facebook and Google and stuff, they would just literally hire any key developers and sort of put them on the bench just so that their competitors couldn't access that skill or that talent. It's pretty competitive. And when I suppose you got incredible money to burn, it starts getting pretty aggressive in terms of those strategies. So maybe a lot of those things would unwind now. Yeah.
Of course, when you have interest rates at zero, you can spend money, right? But when the interest rates start to go up, then everything becomes a lot more expensive, and people have to think, okay, what's the value of my dollar today versus down the road? And you realize that you actually have to keep the dollars instead of spending them, right? And I think that's what a lot of companies are getting ready for. And I've listened to a bunch of VCs saying that they're also telling their companies to kind of keep cash until the end of 2024, because they're saying that this is kind of like the rough patch that might happen. So, and so it sounds a bit scary, but I think at the same time, it gives a lot of opportunities for the outsourcing industry, because you don't stop innovating when times get hard. That's when you have to keep innovating. So You just have to do it more efficiently.
Yeah, that's critical, isn't it? Because these companies, it's a real hard spot to be in. Like
Yeah,
suddenly they are expected to do more to dig out of the hole with less people, and in all of their history, they have just been adding more and more people, more expenses, and becoming inefficient. And now they need to be hyper efficient with less people. And so
yeah,
outsourcing is a phenomenal, or offshore staffing is a phenomenal point for that, isn't it? In that you can
yeah.
still do the development, innovation, the building, and significantly cut costs. How have you seen
Right.
all of this? Because it's been crazy over the last, I suppose, 6 to 12 months in terms of like the boom and then the bust, it seems.
Yeah.
How have you seen the Philippine market amidst that? Is there generally a shortage? Is it generally hard to find people? And have you seen any change in that in the last 3 months?
I don't think so. I think it's still very competitive, and probably because companies understand that the Philippines is a good market to hire people. So we've seen like I mean, the trends haven't really changed, so maybe it's too early to tell. But for us, we didn't see many changes in terms of the hiring. It's still a competitive landscape. We still have to keep on increasing the salaries of our developers. So it's still competitive. Um, we've seen, I mean, for us, but we have a very limited view of the market. But we've seen leads becoming a bit more quiet in the last 4 to 5 months. But now it's starting to pick up again. So because I think the stock market, maybe it's related to that, also has been really trashed in the last 6 months, and even more so from the start of the year, actually. So people were attentive, and I think things are calming down now a little bit on that front. And you see also the Ukraine war is kind of like there's hopes that it could, slow down as well. And I think now people can see the end. There's the midterms that have been passed as well, so people can kind of see a lot of good things starting to move, even though the clouds are not out yet. And so they can maybe be a bit more serene in the investments they want to make forward. Um, so yeah, I think it's a turning point really now. The feeling I have is, and the inflation is also slowing down as well, right? So at least in the US. So
Hopefully. And you
hopefully, yeah,
say the salaries have been going up in the Philippines. Is
yeah.
that pretty constant, pretty consistent? And of course, inflation in the Philippines is up around that, almost double digits as well. So, but where are you seeing salaries in the Philippines head?
Yeah, so they are going up also in the last few months because the dollar has been so strong. So a lot of people could get dollar offers at the moment, and then when they receive, like, because everybody gets like offered jobs on LinkedIn or whatever, people reach out to employees directly. And so when they look at the dollar amounts, then they're like, wow, this is a really good opportunity. But they don't realize that it's an exceptional time now and it's not going to last. And you can actually see that the dollar is going down as the other economies are also raising their interest rates with the central banks. So it's going to become, I mean, maybe just the average as it was in the past, right? So I think this has also played in the fact that people feel like they can earn more, and that companies in the US have been offering more, just like that. But this is probably not going to last also. So maybe this has had an impact also on the increase in salaries in general, because if an employee gets a really crazy offer, sometimes we can't compete. But if the offer is not that big, maybe we could look at trying to keep that person. So it's still pushing everything up. That's the bottom line.
And in the US, like the requests of employees, or the conditions and benefits of employees were sort of hitting fever pitch.
Yeah.
And have you seen any pullback? And significantly as well, employees wanted to work from home, be remote, have a lot more sort of freedom and calling the shots in terms of uh, their appearance. how does that reflect on the Philippines? Are most people now wanting to work from home, and how do you think
Yeah.
that impacts productivity?
Yeah. So we've done this now for almost 3 years. And I mean, the work from home thing, 2.5. We we have surveyed often our employees and our clients to understand, I mean, their behavior, I mean, their wellness or how well they feel at home for our employees, and also in terms of our customers, like how is the quality and the performance perceived, and both signals are extremely positive. So maybe it's location dependent, and if you have less commute, for example, than in the Philippines, and you just have 5 minute walk to go to the office, then maybe the changes are not that dramatic. But in the Philippines, a lot of people were spending a lot of time in the car or like in jeepneys and stuff, and so this time that is not spent in public transportation or in transportation at all, has been seen to improve their quality of life and the quality of what they can produce and their happiness, and probably also simply the performance at work. So overall, it's been overwhelmingly positive, I could say.
Incredible, huh? And that will never reverse now. You think that'll be the new norm?
I think so. So we have no intention for us asking our employees to come back, and that's an attrition problem. So if you were asking people to come back to the office, probably a third of the people would just find another online or remote job. Um, and I still feel like that people are in general asking for more connection, and so we just have to change the culture of the company and try to find better ways for people to get together and communicate. So for example, for us, it's about building, now we're building a gym. So Derek, we're building a CrossFit gym in
No.
Cebu, so anytime you want to come. So we're starting the project now, and so by mid next year we hope that we have that, and we want this to be a place where people can come and have a coffee and work out with their colleagues and friends, rather than forcing people to come back to the office, right? And
Mm.
then we're increasing the amounts of times that people would meet every year, like with the summer parties or the fun days in the office and Christmas party and stuff. So we fly everybody in Cebu, offer them hotel and stuff, and so that's when they can stay for about a week in Cebu and meet again with their friends and colleagues.
And do you think how important is this culture piece? Because I I wonder, like a lot of people, they're like, take it or leave it. And I think in the short term, it's probably not noticed and you can easily forego it. But then in the long term, I wonder, sort of 10, 20 years from now, are we just all sort of going to be floating around in relative isolation? Like a lot of us in our formative years had huge,
Yeah,
I don't know, sort of learning and influence from our workplaces.
yeah.
Is
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. Like it's been absolutely key for us. So I don't know about people who are joining now. We just, for us, I mean, what we're trying to do is we invest a lot in the culture. We have to improve the culture over time. We have to make sure that people are being supported in various ways when they join us. So the onboarding, we have to be better at that. We have to be better at including people and have like their onboarding buddies and stuff. um, I don't know to which extent all of this can replace the office. It's kind of like a trade. I guess it's a trade-off between the comfort of people and how connected they can feel towards the company. So that's why we keep on increasing the benefits. We try to increase all the stuff we offer for people to be healthy and connected. Um, Differently. And we still have an office, so people can come to the office. It's there, and maybe in a year or two we'll see more people coming back to the office. I wouldn't be surprised, but not because we're asking. It's because people want to feel connected.
and how are you seeing the tech environment change over time? Like it's known to be a fast changing kind of environment. And this is really out of my depth in terms of the nature of technology, in terms of
Mhm.
coders, developers, the languages they use, the methodology, the types of things they're building, and the rails that they're building on. How,
Yeah,
I would imagine if you zoom out over 5 or 10 years, 20 years, it changes tremendously. But how is
yeah,
that on a sort of year to year basis, and how do you adapt so that your team and clients are
right.
adapted?
So I think there has been a lot of changes when the internet and all the cloud stuff has been maturing, because people had to kind of find the best technologies, I guess, to that would work with that. So that's why we've seen a big return, for example, in all the JavaScript and now TypeScript um, languages, if you want, with different kinds of frameworks in which this is being used. Um, but it doesn't change dramatically year on year. There's always new stuff coming in, but there's always it always takes time for a framework to kind of stick with the community, and then how well it's being maintained, because it's all about that. You can't jump into something every year that has a small community that is not evolving. So now we kind of see like there's a bunch of uh, frameworks that are here to stay for a while, and then it's more like of an evolution rather than like a change every now and then. We see some new languages coming in, but some stick and then it changes towards using that, and some just are a fad and disappear. But we don't venture into all the new stuff because our clients, for example, they are building their businesses on that technology. And so when you make one investment into one technology, you can't just like change it every year. You have to make it evolve so that you don't uh, have technical debt that's building up. But it's not a change every year. So that's why overall it's not changing every year. It's just evolving and upgrading what's existing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? As you say, it has to be sort of community led, doesn't it? Because it
Yeah,
needs a significant adoption before it's even viable.
yeah,
And these things, of course, aren't taught or adopted in universities or class. It's really by the community that just
that's
they
right.
they build their own skills, don't they?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
It's kind of like what do people like working with, and then how easy is it to implement? How easy is it to maintain? What is the performance? So for different tasks, you have different languages, different frameworks, and then when it's kind of solidified, it stays there for a while. And then now what we see, we have always the same demands. You have Microsoft that's here with the .NET stuff. We have all the JavaScript, TypeScript frameworks that have been here for a long time, and some new frameworks appear, but it's slowly, like it's maybe 3-4 years evolutions kind of stuff. And people kind of, for us to make sure that we still, always on top of things, is we try to train our developers that are on the bench. When we see a new trend, we make sure we give a developer that's been working on an old framework, for example, trainings to be trained on a new framework. It still is JavaScript, it still is TypeScript, so the language doesn't change. Is the framework around it that might be a bit of a change. So it's a couple weeks or maybe months of training for someone to be up to speed. But the craft of coding doesn't completely change or is not reinvented on a yearly basis.
Mm. And what is the journey for a Filipino kid that for some reason finds coding to be their thing? Their journey, I assume, maybe they do a little bit in school, maybe they
Yeah,
then go to college and do a bit, but the
yeah.
vast majority would be sort of within an international forum then, would it? Are they learning the stuff online? They find international forums, or is it still kind of localized to a Filipino community, and or is it purely sort of international now? Like, how do
Um,
people
I,
kind of extend their skills? Or
so I think so. Mostly, I mean, the people we hire, they come from a computer science background from university, so they have learned how to code in school. mostly on older stuff. So it's not super up to date, but it's still like the principles are the same. And so you have the people who are passionate about it, and then they would go online and try to do things and participate to international projects and stuff because everything's online, right? So and open source things they would participate into. Or the other part, because not everybody's a fan of coding, and some make it as their job, right? So because maybe their parents told them, that's a good job to have, and so go do this in university and stuff like that. And so these people, who most of them like their craft, learn this stuff in school, and then they go on to joining a company, a local company or an international company, and they work in the office, or maybe now more, I mean, from home, but still working for a company that is established in the Philippines. And that's where usually these fresh grads spend 1 or 2 years honing their skills, and then seeing what it is to actually code in real life on a on a product that is being used to serve clients and stuff. So with the structure of a company, because it's not the same as participating in a open source project where there's a lot less structure. um, and and then after 2 or 3 years, usually people want to see a change, and that's when they can change jobs and get a much better salary, because then they are becoming like they're a mid-level developer instead of being a junior. So that's basically how what we've seen so far and how it goes.
We should mention Arcanys, of course, Fred. How over the last year, how have you seen things develop for your business? I mean, you're really a sort of microcosm of the broader market, but are you seeing people embracing offshoring more? They're generally more educated about how it works. How are you
Yeah,
seeing things evolve for your business?
yeah, I think COVID has been a main driver in like a change of perception for people, because like our first biggest market for us has always been Australia, I mean, for the last 6 years. And because of the border closures in Australia, people were struggling to find skills. So it became really super expensive, but not just in Australia, but mainly in Australia for us. And so people were like trying to find solutions and say like, I can't, even if I wanted to pay, I wouldn't be able to find the developers. So I guess that's when a lot of people self-educated themselves towards outsourcing and looking at the options that they could have. And the Philippines for Australia again is an easy choice, because in the terms of the time zones and the language skills, it's probably the best option for Australia, really. So that's what I've seen in Australia. What we've seen, for example, in the US is slightly different. Is that they were, I think, a lot more already aware of outsourcing because of the Indian diaspora, and because it kind of started there, really. And so they have been outsourcing quite a lot. And so the prices, for example, in Latin America went up like absolutely crazy. Um, and so now we're seeing a slow shift towards other countries, like maybe the Philippines, because talent is scarce even in Latin America. There's, I mean, language issues, and so they're starting to realize that maybe the Philippines could be a good option, because it's twice as cheap as Latin America. It's crazy to think about that, twice as cheap. And okay, there's a little bit of a time zone difference, but the cost differential, and coming back to the economy, it kind of starts making a lot more sense now.
Yeah, and what about a lot of, and where do you see other emerging economies? I mean, you mentioned LATAM. Colombia is seems the hot space at the
Yeah.
moment. Do you have any sort of do you kind of have people altering their requests? Of course, Vietnam was spoken about really quite a lot about 2 years ago, and now that seems to have died down a little bit. How do you see all of these emerging, uh, competitors or
Yeah.
locations?
So, I mean, for Colombia, I think it's pretty mature as well. That's why the costs have been going up a lot. And the problem, for example, with Colombia, I think is the English speaking skill set driving even more prices up. Just as Vietnam, if you want to have a good developer, you can find one for a reasonable. a reasonable amount. But if you want someone who's speaking good English, then you have to pay more. So there's a discrepancy just because of the language, which is something we don't have in the Philippines because everybody speaks good English. So that's one thing. For the rest, I don't really know. We've looked in. So we are also present in Bulgaria, and we've seen that this market, for example, has been affected quite a lot by Ukraine because a lot of the Ukrainians became offline. So everybody scrambled. If you had devs in the Eastern Europe, then you would probably want to stay there. So putting a lot of pressure on other markets because Ukraine and maybe Russia as well, because you had people having employees in Russia, were two super big markets.
Yeah. And you're European, obviously, and Eastern Europe, and as you say, sort of Ukraine and Russia and Bulgaria and a lot of those states are quite well renowned for developers. And
Yeah.
uh, how are you seeing that evolve? And what do you see as Europe's take on offshoring to the Philippines? They don't seem that sort of aware. And do they just sort of go into their backyard of Eastern Europe typically to source their staffing?
Yeah, I think the Philippines is fairly remote. If you look at the map, it's super remote, right? And people, as you said, they're not very aware of that. And then they're thinking the time zone is an issue. Uh, which if you're organized, it's not, but because we're working with clients in Australia, in Europe and in the UK, but it's just not on the radar. So people would just look close by, right? It's like the nearshoring thing. So if it's not in Eastern Europe, it would maybe go to North Africa, so Tunisia, Morocco, or places like these for especially for French. I think for French companies, and then some. I've heard, people were finding good developers in South Africa. So I don't know really, but so because it's kind of like in the same time zone.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, powerful. And then, Fred, what about Web 3.0? And of course, the whole crypto thing has also been going through a bit of a crisis in the last few weeks.
yeah,
But maybe a year ago, I think maybe the whole crypto thing was peaking. And were you getting a lot of inquiries, requests to, I don't know, build crypto Web 3.0 stuff?
yeah, we did, and we're Swiss, so we're very slow at reacting to new things because we're
Rightly
very
so.
prudent. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, in some cases, rightly so. In some cases, you miss the boat. But the thing is, every client that we want to add to Arcanys has to reinforce the strength of the company. So everything that we see is a risk in terms of us getting involved with clients that have a very risky profile. We just don't take them. And usually they're like flush with cash for a while. They want to blow it all. And it's people who are not so organized. And so they suddenly want 40 devs. And then the next day the market is crashing and then they pull the plug. And we don't want any of that. Um,
Mm.
because we want to be able to sleep at night. But also, what is even more important is for our employees. We can't hire 40 people and then fire them the next day because a client has just blown, right? And so it happened that we had clients that had troubles during COVID because a lot of businesses had to close, basically. But that was an external factor that is not intrinsically tied to the industry in which you're at. And so all these crypto, Bitcoin, markets, like the Web3, the NFT stuff, it's not mature enough for us to want to get involved. That's the first thing. And the second thing, because this is relatively new, the skills cannot come in later in the Philippines, right? So that's why we're really more geared towards extending existing development teams rather than being like the forefront of their R&D stuff, which actually should stay in house. Um, you're building something for your own business, you have to master that. You can't just outsource like the mastery of your IP
Mm.
to an outsource partner. Like, I think that's not the way we would see it. becomes a solid company for them.
Yeah, fascinating. And what about the talent side of that equation then? Do you see a lot of your devs, would you say, this is a generalization, would you say that they're sort of naturally curious, and then when there is this new Web3 thing, crypto, they're drawn towards that? Or do you think that devs are a little bit more, what would you say, prudent, but also they've seen a lot of new languages, new innovation, and they just stick to the tried and tested? Have you seen the community sort of veer towards Web3 much?
So I'm a bit remote from all of that, but I would tend to say what you just said in the last part of your sentence, which is like, I guess the people that are a bit more experienced have seen it all. They know that there's always new stuff coming in, um, and fading. So they probably maybe a bit curious about it and would try it out, and then they would see like if it's fading or not. And maybe for the younger one, they would want to discover more stuff and are a bit more curious. Um, but we don't necessarily know much of that because I mean they are in their projects and so they stick to that. And most of the learnings that we try to encourage them to do is on stuff that is related to their project, is also related to their interests, of course, but it has to have some business sense. So we wouldn't push people to go onto like new fads and stuff because usually it's a risky decision for any business to jump into something before it's been tried and tested.
Yeah, fascinating. And what would you say is your typical client profile then for Arcanys? And how do you see this whole, certainly, in the way that you have looked to implement this, where do you see the sweet spot is for businesses
Yeah.
outsourcing their dev teams?
So we are looking at clients, mostly SaaS companies that do B2B products. And it's mostly fairly mature startups or scale ups that have an internal tech team that has at least one CTO or lead developer, and ideally a few more developers that are looking to extend their team with 4 or more software developers offshore to complement that. So basically, to assist senior developers to go faster with the development of their features on the long term, right? So we are really helping them. I mean, build a strong team that they can rely on over time.
Got it. Pretty powerful stuff, huh? And software is eating the world, isn't it? Like, this will
Yeah,
never abate. Like, literally everything is now software based, and so
yeah,
the demand for developers, coders, like anyone in this industry, is phenomenal.
yeah. And I think it's gonna keep on being like that because there's so much untapped potential still. Like if you think about the way we live, there's already a ton of software around everything, but there's also so many areas where there's still not no software, right? So
Mm.
and then it's opening new doors to so many more things. So I think there's no end to the software eating the world. Really, it might just be more hidden in stuff because it's assisting in ways we maybe don't know of yet, and we probably would have maybe to interact even less with it through our screens. Who knows? But it's just gonna keep on increasing in smart devices. Like if you just think about the headphones I have, like now there's a chip in there. There's like it's calculating stuff, which wasn't the case 5 or 10 years ago. And you have software running that. You have hardware, of course, but you need software to run that stuff. So everything's going to become more complex and more driven with software. So I don't see any shortage of that need.
And just final question, but Arcanys, as coding gets more complex, into the ecosystem has sort of brought more and more things like designers and product
Yeah.
managers and things like that. They're sort of inextricable parts. Do you provide those things, or you just sort of provide the one core function? How do you sort of separate
Yeah.
out those auxiliary roles?
No, yeah, you're right. We do need to have these roles. because we are a software development company that does outsourcing and builds teams and or extend teams for our clients, but we need to have this capability. So when there is a shortage or in the or a gap in the skills that are needed for a project in our clients' team, we need to be able, as a partner, to fill that gap and come in and help them out to fulfill their goals. So we have these designers, as you mentioned. We have these testers. We have business analysts, Scrum masters, a bit of DevOps as well to help them with all that side of things. We have architects that can help them, really senior architects from Europe that are with us to help them with their complex architectural questions for audits. I mean, to help them really build the best stuff they can. If they need help, we're really here for them.
Amazing. As always, Fred, I recommend people just reach out, have a conversation, because the learning is so vast and the opportunity is so incredible for businesses. So as always, if anyone wants to reach out to you or know more about Arcanys, how can they do that?
Yeah, so they can find us on arcanys.com on our website. They can shoot me an email at fred@arcanys.com. And or simply find me on LinkedIn by typing Frederick Joye.
Great, and I'll put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you, Derek. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, rate it, or share it with someone who could benefit from it. Get in touch and tell me what you think on LinkedIn at Frederick Joye or via the link in the description below.